Shavua Tov, Shavua Tov. It's a beautiful Saturday night here somewhere near Hebron, and I have about 2 hours till my next shift. And I'm sure so many people have been asking myself constantly, what can I do? What can I do for the sake of the protection of our soldiers, of our chayalim? What can I do? And you might think, well, you're in the Israeli army, you're doing a lot. Thank God. Thank God I have the merit. But even here, we're not necessarily in the front lines in Gaza, and there's a lot of time. And so there's time for me to think about how can I use my brain and my heart to contribute to the Jewish people. And I've had this idea for a very long time called the Emunah series. And that's basically, Emunah, faith in God, faith in Torah, is a very complex thing, something that's hard to articulate exactly why a person believes. But many a time in my life, people have asked me, why do you believe? And I always wanted to kind of break it down into a few series of different things which bring chizuk, which bring strength. I wouldn't call them the source of my faith in God, but they certainly, when I learn about these things, they give me a boost of energy and strength and belief. So that's what you are currently participating in. I am trying my best to present Torah to the world, to strengthen people's emunah, and if nothing else, it already has strengthened my faith, my practice of Torah and Mitzvoth, and I hope that God is counting this, and I believe that God is counting this Torah that I am sharing and that you are listening to be a protection for the Jewish people, to protect our chayalim. And along with all the tefillas and all the tilim, may this shiur also protect all of Am Yisrael. All right. So with that introduction, our first class is going to be about the topic of Bible codes or Torah codes. Now, again, I will admit this probably isn't the number one. It's probably not even the top 10 of things on my list, but nonetheless, it does really strengthen my emunah when I hear about it. And it's pretty fascinating and opens up new vistas and ways of looking at the Torah for me personally. I'm sure many of us are familiar with the Aish Discovery Seminar, which I definitely recommend for everyone. They do a great job. I wouldn't say it's always presented perfectly, because who can really be perfect? But I do think, especially on a visual level, something like this, this is a audio podcast, so I can show you on the screen the Torah codes in as beautiful way as they might be able to do. It's also a great book that I've been using, which shows a lot of these Torah codes. And if you want, I'll send you some pictures. But since we're on a podcast audio, I'll do my best to explain it without the visuals. And I'll try my best to also add on at the end of the shiur to answer certain questions that that aren't always necessarily answered in the Discovery Seminar, which are legitimate questions, real questions, and I'll try my best to also answer those questions. All right. So, Torah codes. Why in the heck would we think that there are codes in the Torah? Well, the truth is, anyone who's been in the base matters, any Torah scholar knows that this is kind of standard belief in the base medrash, that there's, as we say, shivim panim la Torah, 70 facets to the Torah. And for example, many of us are familiar with gematriot, where we read the Torah and say it not only means a simple interpretation, but there's also teachings, allusions, where we can convert the aleph to mean 1, the bet to mean 2, etc., etc. And there's meaning behind this. So that's only one system, gematriot. But the truth is there are many, many, many hidden layers which traditionally Jews have understood to levels within the Torah. Okay, so it really dates back to this concept of shivim panim the Torah, gematriot. You can find them in the Gemara. You can find them in Balaturim famously. You can follow them in many, many Jewish commentaries throughout the ages, and that's really not too shocking for people. But I think the concept of codes, of hidden messages within, by skipping letters in the text, is more novel. So I wanted to begin with a historical overview of, who did Aish discovery make up this concept, or where's the evolution? So let's begin with the Vilna Gaon. Every Torah student is familiar that the Vilna Gaon is one of the greatest sages in our history. He lived from 1720 to 1797. Legend has it, he knew the entire Torah by heart at age 5. And he lived in the Vilna, of course. And he quotes a sefer called Sifra Titzniuta, which is a Kabbalistic sefer. Actually, amazingly enough, on my shift at night on Shabbos, a friend gave me a sefer, and guess what sefer it was? Sifra Titzniuta. He was saying how just reading it, even if you don't understand, it brings your neshama to a higher level. So it's, I believe, a commentary on the Zohar, an ancient Kabbalistic teachings that the Vilna Gaon quotes. And in it, he wrote, all that was, is, and will be is written in the Torah. And not merely in a general sense, but the details of every person who has ever lived is encoded in the Torah. Wow. Unbelievable claim. Saying that Kalman Yonatan, what he's doing on a Saturday night, in 2023, is written in the Torah in codes. Amazing. So I don't know if I'm going to be able to prove by the end of this year that it's encoded Kalman Yonatan's life, or Jimmy John or anything. But what we can see from here is that the Vilna Gaon believed there were secret messages in the Torah. Okay? In fact, the story goes that someone asked the Vilna Gaon, yeah, really, everything's in the Torah? Where do we see the Rambam in the Torah? So he opened up Sefer Shemot and the 11th chapter of Genesis, discussing when the Jews were leaving Egypt. And in the first letter of each word there, it spells Rambam, which is actually, if you check in the 80,000 different times we have 4-letter sequences in the Torah, the only time it's written Rambam, of course, Rambam lived in Egypt, is right there in, right there in the story discussing the Jews leaving Egypt, and it's right there. Okay, so that's the story. Beautiful. We'll get back to that code about the Rambam in a little bit. But what is important for my purposes is to show you that from the Zohar, it seems, to the Vilna Gaon, there's this belief that there are encoded messages by skipping letters, making the text not just words but letters, and we can derive many messages from this. Messages about our lives. What an astounding claim. Let's get into it. There was another rabbi, I'm sure many of us have heard of him. His name is the Ramak, Rabbi Moshe Cordovero. He's also famous because he wrote the Tomer Devora, a beautiful ethical treatise, which I have the chance to learn with my students sometimes. But he wrote a Kabbalistic work known as Pardes Rimonim. And in Pardes Rimonim, 68a, the Ramak, by the way, the Ramak was the Rebbe of the Arizal, I believe, in Tzfat. He was the Rebbe before the Arizal, right at the time of all the greats in Tzfat in the, 16th century, of Shlomo Alkabetz, of the Alshich. So he was a great, great rabbi. And he had his own unique way of understanding Kabbalah. And the Ramak writes, the knowledge of the secrets of Torah is through combinations, gematriot, numerologies, switching letters, first and last letters, skipping of letters. These matters are powerful, hidden, and enormous secrets. So you'll forgive me for the sound. It's just our brave soldiers coming back from watching over Hebron, over Shabbos, Parshas Chaisara. Anyways, I hope you can still hear me. The Ramak is teaching us that in the numerologies and the skipping of letters, he specifically mentions that, and many other hidden messages have enormous secrets, okay? So we've got another great rabbi in our tradition who believes that you can derive messages from the secrets. And I just mentioned two more rabbis. In the 13th century, Rabbeinu Bachya was known to have mentioned the concept of skipping 42 letters between words. He talks about this. And famously, the Ramban, Nachmanides, also talks about how the letters of the Torah spell out names of Hashem, and that the hidden secrets of our lives are written in the Torah. There's a story about his student Amnon who asked him, really? And the Ramban showed him a pasuk at the end of Parshat Azinu, which alluded to poor Amnon's life. So there you have it. Many great rabbis, of course, many of them Kabbalistically inclined, who mention this concept of skipping letters and how the entire Torah can be recombined, not just to form words, but a big giant letters, and that if you know how to, understand the skips in the right way, you can derive messages. Okay, beautiful. Now, let's skip to the early 20th century. I wanted to give an honorable mention to a professor named Ivan Panin. Panin was a Russian mathematician at Harvard University in the early 20th century, like I mentioned, and he actually became a Catholic, devout Catholic, and he knew Hebrew. And he began to study the Bible in its original Hebrew. And one day he decided to experiment and replace the letters of the Torah with numbers. And his mathematical mind picked up an elaborate pattern, an unbelievable pattern. And what he found was unbelievable patterns. I'll give you an example. He found patterns of 7 running throughout Chumash. Now, you might ask me, Kalman, that's cool. What does 7 have to do with anything? Well, 7, of course, is the main thematic number in Sefer Bereshis, right? 6 days of creation, and then 7th day of Shabbos. So it would make a lot of sense if 7 would be a running theme. So what he found, for example, is that there's 7 words in the first verse of Bereshis. Okay, pretty cool. 28, i.e. 7 times 4 letters in the verse. Okay, pretty cool. The numerical value of the word bara, the only verb in the verse, is 29 times 7, 203. The first and last letters of every word, gematria, is 1393. 7 times 199, another derivative of 7. And etc., etc. I'm not going to get into every detail, but basically, even this non-Jewish professor studied these codes, and he believed the odds of there being so many patterns by chance was 1 in something like, I don't remember if it was millions or billions, but extremely, extremely unlikely that it was just a coincidence, according to Panin's calculations. 1 in several million, maybe billion, I don't remember. Another rabbi, a more modern rabbi, in the early 20th century, Rabbi Pinchas Zalman Hurwitz, also known as the Baal Hafla, researched the occurrence of Hashem's name in the Torah, and he found that, of course, Hashem's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei, is 26 in Gematria. And guess what? It appears 26 times 70, 1,820 times. So another derivative of 70 with the exact Gematria of God's name. Coincidence? He thought not. But truthfully, it's a little bit of a side topic, but pretty fascinating. Okay. Another just worth mentioning that this theme of sevens, of mentionings of names 7 times, runs throughout the creation account. For example, you have the word Elohim, God, 35 times, 7 times 5. Earth, 21 times. Heaven, Shamayim, good, Tov, day, all in multiples of 7. What are the odds? Okay, so we're seeing that there's different ways of interpreting the Torah, which are beyond the simple text, and there's we're now moving on to Rabbi Michal Dov Weissmandel, who is known as the father of my modern-day Torah Code study. So, Weissmandel was actually a Holocaust survivor. He actually jumped off of the rails on the way to Auschwitz. And he actually saved a lot of lives. He tried to get the Americans to bomb the rails leading to Auschwitz. And anyways, he had a genius mathematical mind. And he was inspired by Rabbeinu Bachya. And he decided, you know what? I want to count letters. So he started from the first tuf in the Torah, from, of course, the word Bereshis. He counted 49 letters, skips. And guess what? He got the word Vav. And then he skipped another 49 letters, and he got Resh, another 49 letters. Hey, unbelievable. You skip letters, 49, of course, 7 times 7. 49 is a key word, a key number. And he's got the word Torah, which might allude to the fact that the Torah is the blueprint of creation. He counted he looked for the same pattern in Shemot. The first time Tuf appears, and unbelievably, it did. 49, and once again, it appeared Torah. Pretty amazing. So Rav Weissmandel found a lot of interesting, fascinating codes. Another code that he delved into was the one we alluded to before, the Rambam code. So he noticed that in that same chapter 11 of Shmos, where we said Moshe's name is spelled out, there are other interesting things. He said, well, can I find the Rambam's most famous works, Mishnah Torah, right? His magnum opus. And guess what? He did, overlaying the Rambam in the story of the Jews leaving Egypt, where, of course, the Rambam lived his life. We have the word Mishnah. And then if you skip down just a few words, you have the word Torah. Unbelievable, so close to each other. And then he counted the amount of letters between Mishnah and Torah. And guess what? 613 spaces between Mishnah and Torah. Of course, what is the 613 is the topic of the, what's it called, of the Mishnah Torah. Hi, I just unfortunately got word of more casualties, more brave soldiers who passed away in the brave fighting today. So I just needed to take a moment to rededicate this Torah for the protection of the whole Jewish people. Ezrat Hashem. Hi. All right. Anyways, so an unbelievable code. Now, Rav Weissmandel was, really doing this all before computers. He was doing it just by his own brain. He wrote an amazing sefer about all these unbelievable codes that he was discovering. In the 70s, a rabbi, actually, I don't know if he was a rabbi back then, but he was a mathematician for sure. No, I don't think he was a rabbi back then. Eliyahu Rips and another professor at Hebrew University, I believe, Doron Weitzam, decide they were blown away by this book that Weissmandel wrote, blown away by the finds. Rips himself was a genius mathematician who figured out how to debunk a universally accepted mathematical theory in a Russian jail. So he was no amateur. And they decided to start doing experiments with computers to see if they could find a higher degree of correlation than one would expect when it comes to words in the Torah. I'm sorry. Let me be more clear. Okay, at this point, it's very important for me to point out that in any big text, if you ask a computer to find words when you skip letters, you will almost for sure you will always find words. And anyone who's done a crossword puzzle knows that's not so rare. So what were they looking for? They were looking for in a higher degree that would be expected of skips, and specifically if it's very, very unlikely that there would be so many skips in an area in the Torah which talks about that topic, well, that's just unbelievable, right? To give a analogy, if I run into my friend on Ben Yehuda Street one day, that is not so unbelievable. I mean, it happens. You run into people every once in a while. So too, there will be skips which spell out stuff in any big text. But if every day or every other day even, I happen to run into the same guy in the same place in Ben Yehuda, I run into a guy named Yehuda on Ben Yehuda Street. So and it's exactly at the same time of the day. It's at 10 a.m. So that's going to start me asking questions. What's going on? Why is that? Maybe Ben lives right on Ben Yehuda Street. But there's got to be something to it. It can't just be a coincidence that every day I run into Ben. So that's what we're trying to find out. Is there a higher degree of probability than one would expect of skips spelling out meaningful things? And if it's happening in an area of the Torah related to that topic, well, that's just fascinating. So that's what they wanted to find out. Is this statistically unique, all of these skips? Okay, I hope that point was very clear. Now, so what they did, I mean, they saw a lot of amazing things. They wanted to start doing experiments because that's how science works. You don't just look for stuff. You have to see, if this is true, so this and this should happen. So they said, if there is something to these codes, we should find in an area in the Torah related topically to Aaron's name. So what they did is in the first chapter of Sefer Vayikra, of Leviticus, which talks about the appointing of priests, but interestingly enough does not mention Aaron, will they find Aaron's name very, very often. And that's where they searched, and indeed, they found Aaron's name recorded 25 times in that short segment, and in equidistant skips, right? 3 letters, 3 letters, 5 letters, 5 letters, whatever it is. And then they took not Aleph, Hey, Resh, Nun, but other patterns of those same 4 letters, and they saw how many times they would appear in that same text. And it was far, far less. So it was on an average of 8 times other skips of those same 4 letters, but Aaron, 25 times. They calculated the odds of that happening were 1 in 2,666,818. Wow. Pretty unbelievable. They did the same thing for Hanukkah, right? Of course, Hanukkah is a rabbinical holiday, and they took key words related to Hanukkah and tested and said, we think in this part of the Torah, it's likely we're going to find words related to Hanukkah like Maccabi, Chashmonai, Yehuda, Chet Yamim. And again, in a statistically unbelievable, what are the odds? 1 in millions of chances, they found many, many hits, much more than one would have expected. Okay, so they were convinced. They said, there's something to this. Wow, unbelievable. So what they then did is reached out to another famous mathematician. His name was Mr. Michelson. And Mr. Michelson was an atheist, a skeptic. And they said, we got to get somebody who doesn't buy into Judaism to buy into this and see if it's true. So Michelson said, I'll try it out. He took 3 days. He studied their findings. He was blown away. And he concluded it must have been aliens. Aliens must have written the Torah because it's way too unlikely for this to have happened by chance. But he didn't want to admit that it was from a God. So someone must have put these codes into the Torah. In any case, they went on with their studies, and they decided that they need to get these statistics published in a very popular, a very popular statistical science journal, which is considered maybe the number one statistical science journal, and if they publish it, people will start taking us seriously. So they called them up and said, okay, we have these unbelievable statistics. What can we do to get it published? So the people, when they heard about the topic of codes embedded into the Torah, they were not so happy. They weren't really in the mood. They thought they'd be the laughing stock when this gets disproved, and they put it in their paper. So they said, listen, you helped us craft a study, a tryout, and we'll do it together. And if it reaches whatever, criteria you need, whatever's reasonable, then you'll publish it. So now, in general, the standards they need to publish something in this statistical science journal is it needs to be 1 in 20 that there's a fluke. Meaning 19 out of 20, there's something to this, but if 1 in 20, so that's good enough odds to publish it. For something that's very important, it will be 1 in 50. It will only, let's say, medical things that are life-saving, and there needs to be very, very small chance that this is by chance. For this study, for codes in the Torah, they required a 1 in 1,000 chance for them to publish it in their book. That's what they said. So, Whitsum and now Rosenberg is on the team, said, you know what, we'll do it. And they came up with the following idea. We're going to take an encyclopedia, a standard encyclopedia. We're going to take great rabbis, and we're going to take their day of death, written in the encyclopedia, the year that they died, and we're going to predict that written next to the name of the rabbis, we're going to also find the year that they passed away in a way that is much, the odds of that happening are very, very low. And that's what they did. And they ran the study. It's called the Great Rabbis Study. They took 34 random rabbis, and the odds that they found of them, they found indeed many rabbis, and the days of their yard site were right next to each other. And a lot of times there was other things right next to their age, and their name was the name of their books, etc., etc. Their most famous books. I think that was also part of the study. I believe the odds of that being a fluke of so many rabbis and so many ages right next to each other was 1 in 62,500. They come back to the statistical science and say, okay, got to publish our studies. They say, not so fast. We're going to only study, publish it if Percy Diaconus gives his okay. Who is Percy Diaconus? He was the head of the Skeptic Society and also known as the top statistician, someone who had debunked many a theory. And if he gives his okay, then we'll publish your works. So they come to Mr. Diaconus. He looks at their works, says, okay, very cute. Here's what you got to do. Take the same amount of letters in the Torah, 305,000 and whatever it is exactly, and take that same letters in Moby Dick and search for those same codes, for the names. And they searched, and of course they found some words, but they found nothing of statistical comparison. Nothing. They said, interesting. Let's try another book. So they tried on War and Peace. They tried Moby Dick. They said, let's try it in Hebrew. Maybe it's about Hebrew. They tried it in Hebrew. They tried Achnasat Kala from Shai Agnon. They tried ancient Hebrew. Nothing had any statistical significance. They didn't find any codes in the text whatsoever. Only in the Torah did they find these codes. So at a certain point, they come back to Mr. Diaconus and they said, listen, this is going to go on forever. How many tests do we need to run of, controls where there's nothing statistically significant about it? How many do we have to run before you'll believe us? So he says, well, we need 1 million. If you do 1,000,000 controls and nothing comes up with any statistical significance, then I'll give my okay. So they went home and started running the computers, right? Back then, computers were slow. For 3.5 years, from 1990 to 1994, they ran 1,000,000 tests, 1,000,000 different books, and not one of them had anything of any statistical import. And Percy Diaconis had no choice but give his okay, and the article indeed was published in the Journal of Statistical Science. Unbelievable. Now, at this point, everyone was blown away. Everyone wants a piece of this article to disprove it, to debunk it, right? If there was codes written into the Torah, hidden codes that might have some theological import, so everyone's trying to debunk it. Eventually, all the professors are looking into it. Eventually, an article is written that claims to debunk the science, and basically, they found what they called 5 critical flaws in the theories. And basically, the main idea is that they found 4 rabbis the dates were written incorrectly in the encyclopedia. They actually hired someone to go to the actual graves, get the right dates, and they also had some sort of flaw with the math. So, for a subject as sensitive as this, even, a few switches could tweak all the evidence and could make it statistically significant when it's really not. And they're basically claiming that you tweak the odds, you change things around to be statistically significant, and that's it. Now, at this point, Rips, Whitsom, they say, all right, let's try it. And they took the new dates that they had found, and they switched around the math in it a little bit, and they ran it again. And this time, they found even more unbelievable codes. The odds of such success in these results was, again, 1 in over 1,000,000. So much, much, much more. Wow. Now that they had the more accurate dates. Unbelievable. They called them back. They said, no, publish our new statistics. And the editors said, no, well, we changed our minds. And we don't want to publish it anymore. But to this day, if you go online and go on Wikipedia, they'll most likely tell you about the second article where it was debunked, forgetting to mention that the debunking was debunked. But at that point, people weren't paying attention anymore, and those who believed in it kept studying it. In fact, there's a guy named Harold Gans, and Gans was originally a skeptic, and he started studying the works, and he was so blown away that he started being a chassid of the codes, and he started doing codes which were more less issues. For example, because the names of rabbis are different ways of spelling it, so it can make it complicated. But names of Shas, of the different tractates in the Talmud, there's no dispute about that. Everyone agrees. So he said, what are the odds that there's going to be a higher, statistical probability of finding these codes of Shas in specific places? And again, 1 in millions, the odds of what he found. He tested for the 70 nations of the world in the chapters in Noach, if we would find allusions to the nations of today, and indeed, unbelievable findings. And nowadays, you can find many, many, many Sfarim, Torah, people who dedicate their lives with to finding very fascinating codes in the Torah. Okay, now, I wanted to just mention a few of these codes, but I do recommend, if you're curious, go online, and if you want, I can even send me an email. I'll send you some pictures of some amazing codes. There's new ones coming out all the time. One of the famous ones is the Holocaust Code, where in the portion of the Torah which talks about Hastarat Panim, of God hiding his face after the Jewish people abandoned them, many, many unbelievable allusions to Hitler, Yamach Shemo, to Eichmann, to gas, to Germany, to the Tsar, to the enemy, and all of this in an area of the Torah related to that. Another code which became relatively famous was the Twin Tower Codes. After September 11th, they looked and they found Migdalei To'om, twin towers, the date in which it happened, and many similar things, all in an area of the Torah which was talking about the Egel Azav and the 3,000 people who passed away there. And of course, we know there's about 3,000 people who died on September 11th. So you understand that, many, many people are looking after historical events happen to try to see, did the Torah already predict that in advance? So those are just two famous examples. There's literally thousands of examples nowadays of this type of stuff. Now, a few important points that must be made. First of all, there's a book called The Bible Codes by Michael Drosnin. Now, Bible Codes, what he tried to do is predict things which will happen in the future. And he may have gotten it right once or twice, but the problem is he also got it wrong a few times. So this is a good proof of what we are not meant to be doing with Bible Codes. No one in our tradition said we're supposed to read the text to be a prophet, to tell us what to do. Rather, the concept is that we're supposed to derive chizuk, strengthening of ideas which we already kind of believe in, but just like gematria, being mechazik these things to show that it's all from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but not to predict things in the future. So this is not endorsing or condoning Bible Codes. In fact, I think it does a lot more damage than good, because people throw out the whole concept, because when people use it in ways which are not true, so then they throw away the whole thing. So we're not talking about Michael Drosnin's Bible Codes. I think Drosnin predicted there'd be Armageddon in 2002, so thank God he was wrong about that. Another very, very important point to be made, like I mentioned, you can find words in skipping letters throughout the Torah, in any text. So Christians can misuse this and say, oh, look, it has, Jesus, or how they'll refer to him in Hebrew, and they'll find, I don't know if they do, but I imagine them, and if Muslims wanted to, they can find all sorts of codes. So that's why it's so important to stress that you can find words is not so surprising. What we need is serious statisticians who are asking, what are the odds of us finding this amount of skips in a particular area of the Torah? And if it's statistically significant, if it happens way more than one would expect, then that's a wow moment. But just to find a bunch of words is actually not so impressive in any large text. So that's extremely important point. And that is also why, I'll be completely honest, that I wouldn't completely, personally, base my faith on Torah codes. And that is because the naked eye can see some amazing things through the Torah codes. You can see amazing messages, but I won't necessarily know if it's statistically significant. I'm reliant on those statisticians who know a lot more about this topic. And I think we all are, unless you're a serious statistician. Apparently, it takes years to really be able to handle this. Now, I happen to, know some of these statisticians, and just I get a vibe from them, from the dozens of them, that they're not liars. They're serious scientists. They're putting their careers on the line. I don't think they're lying to us when they say that it's unbelievably statistically significant what we find in the Torah. I think they're telling the truth. But it's a nuanced type of thing. It's not something that the naked eye will necessarily be able to know. And that is why, it's hard. I basically would be basing my faith on statisticians, trustworthy statisticians. But at the end of the day, it's not something I can see with my own eyes. And I do think that's a legitimate critique. But the truth is, many things in life we rely upon other people, doctors, scientists. So if they seem to be credible, then it seems to me relevant to it's shaykh to rely upon their edus. What else? Okay, this is a last important point, perhaps, in terms of a question that many skeptics have asked. Our Torah that we have as Ashkenazim differs slightly from Torah scrolls that are of Yemenite import. There are, if I'm not mistaken, 9 differences, almost all of them relating to vavs and whether there is a vav or not a vav, whether it's chaser or maleh, and one actual letter variant, the word daka, if it has an aleph or hey. So the question is, wouldn't this mess up all of the studies? Because they only did this on the Ashkenazi Torah, these studies, at least originally. So if there are differences, if perhaps the real text that Hashem gave Moshe is the Yemenite Torah, so wouldn't that significantly mess with the data? So that's a very good question. But statisticians have answered that there's so few differences. Again, some of them have a vav and some of them don't have a vav. Only a few differences throughout the entire Torah, and about 1 every 25,000 letters. So it would not mess up all the stats, basically. To think about it simply, think about the Aaron code, right? So in that 166 letter skip code, in those 166 letters, if there was a vav or not a vav, it's true that it could mess with some of the calculations. But the odds are there's no change. There's no vav difference because it's only 166 letters. Again, it's only 1 in every 25,000 letters that there is a textual variant. Some of them could also cancel each other out. And the truth is, if we didn't have these textual variants, perhaps it wouldn't be 1 in a million. It would be more like 1 in trillions. Perhaps the odds would be even more unbelievable that you have so many Aarons in that one place, so many more codes if we had the exact Masorah. Perhaps not. The way I understand it, and I think this is, again, another significant point, is that Hashem runs the world. There's Hashgacha Pratis. So if the Torah that we got into our hands, that we read every week on Shabbos, is the Torah that we have, then that was the Ratzon Hashem. God wanted that to be our Torah. Regardless of if it's exactly, if there's a few vavs that are different from the Torah that was given at Mount Sinai. But God wanted us to get this Torah, and that's why this Torah is proving to be still statistically unbelievable. There's still these codes in an unbelievable type of way. And I was also, when pondering this issue, thinking about the fact that if any idiot could just see, wow, there's codes all over the place and not even arguable, then maybe there wouldn't be any free will. But instead, we have these, one who looks into the issue and truly seeks the truth and reads a lot of articles can see, wow, there really might be something to this. And one who wants to look for reasons to not believe might just get swept away by the cynics and say, oh, there's all a bunch of rubbish. So at the end of the day, it comes down to a person's free will, our choice, whether we want to believe or not to believe. Like so many of these Amunah things, I think one who's looking for the truth can find reason for chizuk, reason for strengthening of our belief. And one who's looking to be cynical has reason to be cynical. Or maybe cynical is not the right word. One who's looking for problems can find problems. But I think we really open up our minds and hearts to see all these unbelievable codes, it can mechazik our belief that God wrote the Torah, that He perhaps put these codes just for our generation, our computer generation, to find these unbelievable codes, to know that there is someone who's controlling the world, that the Torah is divine, and to give us that hug from above, to know that everything that happens is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's about all I have to say on this wonderful topic. It took me many hours to research because it's a complex topic. I guess I do have more to say, but it's been a long enough shiur. So if you have any questions, please send me a WhatsApp send me an email, keithflax@gmail.com, keithflaks@gmail.com. Happy to send you some interesting articles on this topic. I hope, please God, it will whet your appetite to look more into the topic. You can go on YouTube and just write codes, and you can see that presentation from Esha Torah. You can go to the Discovery Seminar. And I hope this will open some people up to new venues of seeing the power, the beauty, the amazingness of our Torah HaKadosha. All right, signing out from somewhere near Hebron on this beautiful night. May Hashem protect all of you and all of our people.